on this computer. Oh gosh. Okay, so thank you all for coming. We're going to be talking about what the future, career transitions during an uncertain economy, and job search strategies. As I mentioned, my name is Kelsey. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm here to help you all. Something fun to know about me that is relevant for our conversation is that in my free time, when we're not socially distanced, I do storytelling showcases and improv comedy. Not stand-up, improv. So I work with a group of people to tell funny things. So I'm hoping that today's conversation can be focused on building hope, finding those sparks of joy through the process, and being real about what's going on. Like, how authentic can we be, and where do I fit in that process? And I just want to be one guide for you all along the way, and like what that looks like. So with that in mind, these are just some brief note. If you're like, but what's the Kerr Center? What are you about? So the Kerr Center at CSU is all about the principles of community. And I put these up here especially because we're in a digital space, and sometimes it's easy to forget, oh yeah, like we're still a community, right? These rules still apply. This is still important to us. And so just know that at the Career Center in particular, we are very focused on identity-based resources, honoring students' identities and helping you navigate the game that is finding a job, so that you feel like a boss and you can go change the world. Okay. But if I feel like throughout the webinar, if we get a troll or if folks don't feel like they can uphold the principles of community, I will call us into that, and I will have to like mute or hold you accountable. I'm not worried about it for this crew, but just as a note, I wanted to make sure that was mentioned. Okay, so here's the idea of what I'm hoping we can talk about together. How do we do this, right? Like what are questions that I'm holding on to? What are things I'm looking for? And then how to navigate that uncertain future. Like I remember Michaela was mentioning like, Michaela was mentioning, oh my gosh, like how do I, like, what do I need to take into consideration in the next couple months? What's changed? What hasn't changed? And I think that's great questions. And at the end, we're gonna have some action steps and resources so that everybody feels like it's relevant. These are just some learning outcomes that I hope we accomplish, but ultimately I want you to take from this what's relevant to you right now, and what your future wants to be, because what the future? Okay, so with that in mind, we kind of talked about this before, but I just want you to take a moment to write some of these things down if it's relevant for you. Okay, now I did ask you at the beginning as a prompt, but I just want to give you a moment to reflect on these 3 questions, because this can be your guide as we go through the rest of the content. Like, what are my needs? What's the next step? And who am I going to turn to so that I know I'm not alone in this process? I'm going to pause the recording. I don't know how many of you have seen Frozen yet, or Frozen 2, but I love memes. Like that's my love language, if someone sends me gifs and memes. But I just wanted to, again, acknowledge the emotional transitions that y'all are going through right now as seniors. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of grief, right? And grief is valid. Even if, like, I know one person mentioned that they had an offer that was rescinded. That sucks. Like, that totally sucks. And it's not any easier to just pretend that it's fine and we can just move on. But I think it's important for folks to find outlets to process these feelings, whether it's, with a friend, a family member, or a journal, or a counselor. I can't emphasize that enough. Rejection is hard enough already. A job search is hard enough already without all these things that you're also managing right now with our current situation. So just things to keep in mind is I hope that you continue to take care of yourselves, and other things might come up. As a last note, tactically, on this slide that I wanted to mention, employers are feeling the exact same things. And this is important to mention. So if some of you, like you mentioned, you had an offer, but it was rescinded, if you're like, well, what employers are still hiring or not, that information changes by the hour, right? And so the best thing we can do is to stay as in tune with that information as possible, and to figure out what information is going to serve me versus am I just going down a rabbit hole of a black hole of the internet and the economy, right? Like, everything is over. Right? Like, what are boundaries I can set for myself of what information do I need, and what information is not serving me? So I do want you to check in with that. And Sam and I will talk about resources that you can use to stay in tune with what employers are still hiring, while reckoning with the reality that that might change tomorrow. Okay, so as you mentioned, your goals might need to shift, but not drastically, and only you can determine what those priorities are. And we'll do a little bit of myth busting around that. Okay, are there any other thoughts or questions on this slide? I'm gonna pause. Okay, next slide. All right, myth busting messages. So this is true no matter what, but particular during COVID. If nothing else, if you took nothing else away from this workshop, we have to have hope through this process. Okay, if we feel like we don't have anything to offer to the world, if we feel like any opportunity we have isn't going to be enough, whatever we apply to is going to fail, it's just not going to work, right? So finding ways to be real with yourself is important. But yeah, so the top one, finding a job is a game and the game is rigged. What? Like, I'm saying that. Do any of you feel like sometimes on a job description, it's like you have to get experience in order to, you have to have experience in order to get experience? Yeah? Okay. Or, you know, based on my identities, I'm going to have a very different job search experience than someone who does not share that. Or, you know, folks who have access to different resources, like family members who are in healthy networks, in the industries you want to go into or not, just the things that we've been exposed to throughout our lives or not. Career journeys are really personal, and not everybody has access to the same things. So with that, you know, bummer note in mind, what we're hoping to do in the Career Center is help you realize that you don't have to lose your humanity in a job search process. And actually, we hope that to give you the tools to like power through and kick some butt, so that you can go in and change that game. So it's less rigged for the people that follow you, right? Like, what's our legacy? But you're like, yeah, but right now I need help. Like, I need to navigate that rigged game. So some notes that I think are important are that you do have something valuable to offer to the world, especially as communication studies majors when we're in a media like focused environment right now. Storytelling is everything right now. And your major also doesn't determine the rest of your life or career. So some of you might be having these nagging questions of like, what can I do with this major? Or what skill sets do I have? Or do I have to go into a certain career? I have a theater major in med school. Okay, like it does not matter what your major was. It matters what competencies you have and what competencies you want to gain and what your social capital is to get you to that next step, or your career community and your connections. Okay, so yes, lastly, your job does not determine your worth as a person. So I know somebody mentioned their big goal is housing. Like, I want to buy a house in Colorado. Like, yes, that is a really great long-term goal. And in a couple weeks, we're going to have virtual career conference, an exchange of tools and connections with employers. And one of the sessions will be with a financial advisor who can give you advice about what do I do during COVID or during an uncertain economy. What do I do during an uncertain economy? Like, how do I invest money, or how do I choose like what to invest in, or what should I do to set myself up? So I think knowing your financial literacy is going to be super important in order for you to make those long-term financial goals. Okay. And lastly, comparison is futile. Okay, so some folks might have this super awesome gig set up, and you might be doing 2 part-time gigs in order to pay your rent. Your search is not any less valid. It also doesn't mean that you didn't work as hard as that person or want it any less. I think the reality of this uncertain economy is that we're going to have to change our mindset to really focus in on what are my top priorities, and that's going to be different for everyone. And it might need to be more flexible. Typically, when I talk with liberal arts majors in particular, or any graduating students, anytime you graduate, the first 1 or 2 years, it's okay to be figuring it out. Like, it's okay to be trying out different things and be like, ooh, that was awful. Or like, ooh, I loved that. Or, ooh, that did not pay enough, and now I know my worth, right? There are so many lessons that you have gained just from being in college that you couldn't have known before you got into it, right? And the same thing is true for these next couple of years of your life. And you have 100% survival rate of everything you've gone through so far. So I know for certain that you have the tools to get through this. And if you don't, then we're going to talk about what are additional resources that might support you. Okay. So with all that in mind, brief job searching tip. Each of you are talking about how do I find that cool job and not just waste my degree? And that's valid. if you're figuring out how do I split up my time for this next job search, spend it effectively. Now, this is typically true across the board, but I will say right now, if you reached out to a bunch of employers in your field to ask them like, hey, like tell me about what it's like in a day in the life or what opportunities you might have, a lot of them are still stunned. Like I mentioned, like a lot of them will not have answers to what opportunities are going to become available or not. But knowing that while there might be a freeze for hiring, for example, you can always build relationships. Like that's really where the people power is, and something that will follow you your entire life. So I highly encourage, especially because it relates to fiscal capital, right? We were talking about how will my salary for my first job out impact my third job out? That part of that is social capital and knowing like who's a person that can advocate for me for this raise or this promotion, who is a good mentor. So networking is a critical part of your job search no matter what, but especially during an uncertain economy. Okay, I'm going to pause on this slide just for a moment, but yeah, so we're going to talk about mapping out timelines and things like that. Okay, so something that was brought up is just the idea of, yeah, it's unsettling to not know what employers are thinking of or how am I going to get through this? I'm a planner. I am also a planner. So something that helped me make sense of graduating into an economy that was less than ideal is mapping out a timeline by first, like even thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I need housing, I need food, I need to pay my rent, right? So I put on this chart an example of how you might be able to map out some major life decisions, right? Which, you know, there's so many different ways to do this, but something that might be helpful to get yourself organized and wrap your head around that concept. So I did a short-term goal, like immediate high need, and then a longer-term goal, right? Of like, do I want to go to grad school? Just to provide perspective on how you can approach these processes in different ways. So the biggest thing I encourage you all to do is to take that personal inventory, things you're probably already aware of, especially for those planners in the room that we talk to. But I want you to even write it down. If you haven't done that yet, sometimes that helps you feel that sense of control. But again, take what works for you and leave the rest from this webinar. But if you say, what are my immediate needs and how can I address this? And what am I going to do next? Right? That's one way that you can start thinking through, how do I manage this unmanageable situation? Because yeah, if your immediate need is that I have rent to pay, you're going to have a very different conversation with yourself than, actually, I do have housing and I'm really looking for my first dream job and I'm still going to stick to that. I can have a longer timeline then, right? So depending on the resources that you have a different timeline based on what you're looking for and what your priorities are. Make sense? Okay, cool. I saw a couple nods. All right, so we're gonna cruise forward, but again, I highly encourage you to map out like, what are my needs, how can I address it, and what's next, so that you feel like you're in the driver's seat and you're not alone in this. My favorite thing to do on this chart too, as a side note, is at the bottom put, who can I look to for this need? So keep that in mind as well. Like, you don't have to figure all this stuff out. Next, for every graduating senior, this is actually my favorite thing to do with them, particularly if you're looking for a job or if you're making a grad school decision, having a priorities reflection is a really good idea. So another thing I like for folks to write down is, what am I looking for in a job, right? Based on, I must, you know, whether it's I must pay rent or what in this job am I looking for? And some specific things that you're gonna need to figure out first and foremost for any job search engine is, what location, what job type, whether it's like full-time, part-time, internship, remote. I remember Taylor mentioning like, I don't want to do just an internship, and that's valid. For the time being, and knowing that this is a flexible economy right now, looking at paid internship jobs that could lead to full-time might be an option in the interim. And we don't know yet, right? Only you can know if you see something and it still aligns. But if it's an unpaid internship, like if your must-have is that it's paid, if it's an unpaid internship, why the heck would you apply to that? Right? So these, again, mapping out these priorities and putting it on a timeline if it's helpful, just can help you get that sense of, what can I say yes to or no to, so you don't waste your own time. It also gives you something to talk to. I don't know if any of y'all have that uncle that's like, so what are you going to do with that major? Oh, like when you graduate. But if you do have that uncle, like I did, it's helpful to sometimes have some very specific things that you can throw back at them so they leave you alone. So things to pay attention to. What was it? And like I said, so for graduate school, it's the same thing. Like, do they have to have financial aid? What location? What are the faculty like? What's the placement rate for graduates from that program? Just some things to pay attention to or think about. Okay, I'm gonna hit pause. Okay, we're recording. So some great questions came up already about long-term versus short-term planning. Like, when do I make a 5-year plan versus a right now plan? And how, just how do I deal with uncertainty? So something to think about that I hope you all can reflect on. I don't have this question on the screen, but I want you to think about a time in your life when something didn't go the way you expected, right? What was a time, whether it was romantic or academic or professional, what was something that didn't go to plan? And what happened, right? Like, what did you learn from that situation? What got you through it? How did you survive it? And how could those skills be applied to now? Or how did that change your mindset now, right? So when you think about a 5-year plan, something that I think is helpful to think about for 5-year plans is when you're making a significant financial investment, whether it's med school or grad school or buying a house or getting a dog, like a long-term living thing that you're going to need to think about for the long term. But as it comes to career development, I don't know about you all, but I hope that you were different 10 years ago than you are today. And I hope that in 10 years, you're going to have different skill sets, perspectives, and interests that evolve as you do. So something that is helpful to think about is, what are skills I want to gain in the next year? What are networks that I want to build in the next year? What's a question that I'm curious about in the next year? And that's a valid thing to build off of. That's something that's tangible, that you can build in a job description, that you can talk about in an interview, that you can seek opportunities for. And it isn't, well, in 5 years, I will be a lawyer and have this exact practice in this location. Like, if nothing else, right now in our time just shows us that nothing is certain, and it's okay. So I hope that, again, if you're wondering, how do I plan my dreams? We want you to keep that hope and cultivate that hope. Go for the big dream that you're excited about right now. Let them tell you no, and also reckon with the idea that it might not exactly happen the way you thought it would. And maybe it's going to be really hard, or maybe it's going to be awesome and we didn't even know it was going to be that way. But all we know for sure is we don't have all the answers, and we want you to give yourself the space and time to get those answers so that you can make informed decisions moving forward. No one has it all figured out. That should be in the myth busting. No one has it figured out. Okay. With that being said, in the meantime, write down these priorities and reflection on them, of the must have, the would be nice, absolutely not, so that you can get a good idea of what's important right now. And maybe in that must have or would be nice, write down some of the skill sets you want to gain. That's designing a life, right? Like, what are you interested in? What's sparking joy? Like, let's get some Marie Kondo up in here, right? Magic of tidying up. Let's talk about sparks of joy. Okay. All right. So lastly, if you're like, I just want a checklist of how to do a job search, great. Like, if you have not done these things, this is a good thing to start. I don't know about you all, but when you're in an online environment, it's really hard to structure your time sometimes, or to manage it. So something a student told me, that she's like, put this in your slide. She was like, what's your task of the week? Like, what's your job search task of the week? And I was like, you big dork. That's awesome. So find ways to make a job search your project. Is it class times, quote unquote, that you put in your calendar? Is it a task of the week? How are you going to celebrate your progress and measure it, right? That's something that's so important to stay steady through a process. And then nuts and bolts wise, finish and update a resume that's going to be tailored to an industry you're interested in. Learn how you can tailor that resume to adapt to different industries in case you do need to be more flexible. And you're like, but Kelsey, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, great. That's why we have a Career Center and other webinars about storytelling. So we'll help you figure out how to do that. But once you're done with that resume, make sure you upload it to Handshake and create a LinkedIn profile. Again, come to other sessions to learn more about the nuts and bolts of those. But if you go to our online resource center, like Mahala mentioned, you will find all sorts of handouts about those resources. Okay. Make keywords and save searches for automatic alerts. We're going to walk through how to do that in Handshake so you can see an example. But this way you don't need to be on a website every day, like all the time, stressing about this constantly. So just something to pay attention to. If you meet 70% of the qualifications, apply for the job. If you're excited about it, apply. We all know people who are in positions that they are not 100% qualified for, but they are in right now. So make sure that you apply for those jobs, and don't stop applying until you have signed, sealed, delivered, and started that position. Okay. Building connections. I'm going to briefly do a handshake demo just because I know that was a specific request at the beginning. But if you are looking for remote work options, I also encourage you to check out flexjobs.com. This is also on the Kerr Center website, but it is such a great resource for remote opportunities if that's what you're looking for. And network with CSU alumni on LinkedIn. Again, different webinar, but come on in and learn about that with the Kerr Center. And with those LinkedIn connections, you're going to want to do informational interviews, which are basically a conversation with someone in the industry you're curious about to say, tell me about your life. What opportunities are here? What educational paths? Like just giving the scope so you can learn more. Okay, so I'm going to switch screens real quick just to share Handshake and make sure folks are using that to the best of their abilities. Does everybody see Handshake now on my screen? Oops, one sec. Yes, okay, great. So the easiest way to navigate to Handshake is actually going to the Kerr Center website, okay? So if you're like, I want a job, jobs, right up here is the link that takes you right to Handshake. So that's where it takes you. Also, as a brief note, since I'm on this page, if you're interested in doing a virtual appointment with us, this is where you can click and it takes you right to our appointment calendar. So come on in. Or if you want to do a quick drop-in, we have them from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday, and they are so underutilized right now, so please come in. But Monday through Friday, you just go to this little chat box, hit chat, and then it walks you through the whole process, okay? But anyway, so we're going to jobs because we're like, I need a job. So we'll go to Handshake. We click jobs, right? I can't tell you how many students were like, I didn't know where to click. I'm like, boo, it says jobs. So click jobs, and this is what shows up. So now this is great. We have 13,519 jobs on Handshake. Always start with Handshake with your job search. It might not be where you finish, but it's where you should start, because this is where employers who are trying to recruit CSU students post jobs and internships, okay? Now, specifically, you might have certain needs like location, right? As we mentioned before, get clear on those priorities and plug them in. I'm just gonna do Fort Collins, Colorado. We're gonna do not 50 miles, but 5 miles. And then we will filter as well for paid roles only, okay? Because duh, we wanna get paid. So now again, these are no keywords or anything. It's just within 5 miles of Fort Collins, what are paid jobs? And right now we have 161 postings. I see
Hey,
it.
Kelsey.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just had a quick question. Is this something, and you might not know the answer, but is this something that employers are updating even in our like state of unstable economy?
When you say employers are updating, you mean Handshake?
Yes, like yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah. No, it definitely does. So all of these postings have been live. Now again, we might apply for a job and then they might have to freeze in the middle, or they might have you sign and then they're like, actually, we have to lay off, right? But these are active job postings, and at the end, I will make sure in like the YouTube video that we create from this, I'll have all the links so that you all can easily access them. But there's a live job postings board that's like a spreadsheet saying employers that are freezing or pausing hiring or actively hiring still. So that way you can at least know like very specific employers and what they're up to. Or if you see an employer you're excited about, you can check that spreadsheet to be like, ooh, they said that they're doing layoffs or that they're not sure yet. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No, great question. Okay, so this is the page, but obviously you're gonna have specific internships. I'm gonna put communications just for fun. But I want you, when you think about keywords, get creative. What are your interests? What are some skills? What are industry things? You all have had to find an article for a paper before. I know that you know how to use keywords and get creative with them. So with that, let's say communications, like this is the best ever search term you've ever had. You're like, yes. Let's say it's full-time job in communications, Fort Collins paid, 38 jobs posted. What? You can click save your search, and then it will create a job alert so that it automatically alerts you when new things come up under that job posting. Yeah. Awesome. Yes. So Sam posted in the chat the link for jobs, the updated list of who's freezing jobs right now. So that way you can cross-check with that list. Okay. Any other questions about Handshake? No? Okay. So once your resume is up to snuff, I want you all to go here to, well, I'll move the face. We'll go here to profile here and then go to documents. And under documents, you can select from your computer, upload your resume, and it syncs over to your profile automatically. And you are so much more likely to be seen by an employer if you do that. Awesome. Yay. Okay, cool. So again, be careful for nerves. Listen to what Sam's advice is saying in the chat. So again, that's what we mean by mindfully consuming your information. Like, what do you need to know right now or not? So that you can be mindful in your search and not wig yourself out if not necessary. Okay, awesome. But again, when in doubt, CSU Career Center, this is the page that you need. Okay, I'm gonna do a new share and come back to the main slides, and we will wrap up soon, I promise. I recognize we're over time a little bit, but share. Okay, so everybody sees my PowerPoint slides now? Yeah, okay, great. Are there any questions about Handshake, Flex Jobs, or CSU alumni? Not, we're good? Okay. Hopefully that helped you navigate it a little bit better, but that's the best way to approach it. In terms of, because a quick question came up earlier about, but how do I know that they're hiring my major? Boo, they're hiring your experience, right? They're hiring your story. They're hiring who you are. And so that's why really what matters is storytelling your skills to the position and organization so much more, and building relationships at that organization so that that stands out a lot more. Okay, and then this piece. So for the planners in the room, I'm sure you have something similar or you're gonna get very excited, but something that's really helpful to stay organized is to create an Excel application tracker. It could be Google Docs, it does not matter, but just one little thing so that you can stay organized through the process, especially for using multiple websites. One student brought up though that he was like, it was super sad. I just saw all these rejections on my Excel spreadsheet and it was demoralizing. And I was like, boo, oh. So again, that's why I keep bringing up being mindful of every time, like when I did this Excel spreadsheet, I was going through a similar experience of tons of red, right? Being like, rejected, oh no. And something that I want you all to find a way or a mindset that will help you stay present with that. I saw it as, wow, I was brave enough to set myself up for that many yeses. I'm going to keep going, because you only need one offer that you want. That's it. You don't need 20, you need one. So again, go back to those times that you something didn't work out the way you thought it would, and realize that nothing in this economy is your fault right now. So there might be higher rejections, but it's not your fault. And we're going to talk about how you can set yourself up most for success. Like I said, based on storytelling, based on networking, etc. Okay. Lastly, if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm getting all these interviews but not past the interview, then boo, maybe we need to work on your interviews. Like that's that story. So one of my favorite resources on the Kerr Center website is Big Interview. Her name's Janet. Okay, it's not really Janet. I just call her Janet. She has a red power suit, and she's a pre-recorded lady that you can choose what questions you want her to ask you. And then you set yourself up with that interview, mock interview. She asks you, and then you practice responding to those questions. And you can record yourself doing it, which is super helpful. Every student who's used it so far has been like, this was so great. And especially in an online environment, we're going to be doing a lot more digital interviews. So it's important that we know how to do that. Okay. So again, find that on the Career Center website, and there will be links in the YouTube afterwards. But in the meantime, if you're like, yes, but my needs are super special and I have questions, or I want to workshop this resume, let's go. Great. We have drop-ins from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. As I mentioned, please come in. They're all virtual. We've got your back. And Sam and I are wide open right now. Like, we have been dying for y'all to come in, and I know you're in shock right now. But this face and Sam's face, we are here. Like, we want to see you. So if you go on Handshake, as it says on the right-hand side, on Career.Call State to Handshake, it easily says, it explains it right on that main page. Or if you just go to our website, it walks you through directly how to make an appointment. Okay. But when in doubt, if you're like, but I want to talk to you or Sam, great. You can email us and I will make sure you have that. Lastly, if you're like, but all these things brought up more questions, I understand. That makes sense. So I'm trying to create as many outlets as possible for you all to just have a face and a career coach to talk to, which includes What the Future webinars. So every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m., I am here. Like, I am here. I'm your coach. These are some topics that we have laid out for April. We're going to be adapting these based on some events that are coming up. And April 22nd and 29th, we're actually going to have, we finalized the name yesterday, the Virtual Career Conference. So it'll be an exchange of tools and resources and connections with real employers who are hiring right now and us, so that you can feel coached and ready to tell your story and engage with those employers. There will be a lot more online interactions with employers, and we just want you to feel prepared for that. But these are webinars. They're happening. At the bottom, it says the Zoom link, but again, I will make sure it's included afterwards. And these are all recorded on the College of Liberal Arts YouTube page for CSU. So if you're like, I didn't catch that, like all the topics that we covered today are in this week's job internship searching website. So you're not going to see anything new. But for building your socially distanced career community or storytelling, we've got your back. Okay. And then lastly, blitz of resources that might be relevant for you. Kerr Center newsletters, they come to you weekly. We have job openings in there that are actually hiring right now. We have an online resource center like Mahela mentioned. So that's awesome. And again, if you have an apartment lease that you're figuring out, how do I pay rent, or can I get out of it, or a job contract that was rescinded and you want to see if you have legal standing, use CSU Student Legal Services. It is a valid resource to do so. Even just to know your rights is really important. If you're having trouble, and again, you can read through these, but again, there's just lots of opportunities and resources that are out there. The only one I wanted to mention or pay specific attention to is the quarantining in a non-affirmative LGBTQ environment. As a queer person, I thought it was important to put that article there. It's from them, which is a great resource if you're figuring out, how do I read during COVID, or during while I'm social distancing, how do I stay connected to the queer community? The Pride Center has some fantastic online resources and community building spaces. But again, all of these are relevant. They're all linked, and I'll make sure you get access to them. Okay, so as a last note, that was a lot of information. There were a lot of feelings that were processed. And all I want y'all to do is to write down one thing that you will do for your career development. Maybe Sunday's a little ambitious. We'll say next Friday. But what is by next Friday, what is one thing that you will do for your career development? Okay, and I'm going to turn off the recording so I can hear what folks have to say. But again, what is one thing you'll do by next Friday? And then questions or feedback. All right, so that's my contact information. You can call me BP if you want to reach me. Like, I am not shy, but reach out. We've got your back. You're not alone. Okay, just go change the world and keep us posted. That's it. All right, so thank you.